You changed the color of your hat, John.
Yeah, I did. Got a blue one on now. Doesn't say polio warrior, just a plain old Rotary.
Do you have a pink hat?
Can everyone please stand? Good afternoon and welcome to the meeting of Rotary Club of Seattle number 4, named for being the 4th oldest club in the world and one of the largest. I'm Beth Knox, your club president. As we convene today, we respectfully acknowledge that we do so on unceded Coast Salish land, specifically the ancestral land of the Duwamish, Suquamish, Stillaguamish, and Muckleshoot tribes. This acknowledgement does not take place of the authentic relationships with indigenous communities, but serves as a first step in honoring the land we are on. We acknowledge and pay respect to the first peoples who gathered here, to elders past and present, and to all indigenous people. November is Native American Heritage Month. It's a time to celebrate the rich histories, diverse cultures, and important contributions of our nation's first people. Whether it's patronizing Native-owned businesses or visiting the Native American art exhibits at the Seattle Art Museum, Burke Museum, or Henry Museum, I encourage Rotarians to be intentional about celebrating our Native American heritage. For recommendations on how to do this, I recommend you visit Seattle website for great ideas. Now here at Seattle 4 Rotary, we enjoy music, singing, and words of inspiration to kick off our meeting. Leading our music committee today is past President Jimmy Collins, who is accompanied by Freeman Fong. And following the music, I invite Tom Massaras to share our inspiration for the day.
Thanks very much, President Beth. I would add to the intentional land acknowledgement that we have an obligation, those of us that are in leadership roles in our community, to be good stewards of the land, and recognition of our forebears and taking care of things now is really important. Remind you that coming up in the next 7 days is a big election, and I was listening to the predictions this morning here in the two most populous counties in our state, King and Pierce. They're expecting somewhere between a 67 and 72% turnout. That still means there's at least a third of us, if we're typical in this room, that need to be sure we get out and vote. So please do. It's a part of our stewardship responsibility. And to kind of cement that in your mind, this is our land. And so, Maestro, if you could help us. As I was walking a ribbon of highway, I saw above me and in the skyway, I saw below me a golden valley. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. The sun comes shining as I was strolling, the wheat fields waving and the dust clouds rolling. The fog was lifting, a voice came chanting. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. Good job. Thank you. You may be seated. Well, building on the theme that Jimmy Collins led us into, next Tuesday is Election Day. And for the most part, if you are a U.S. citizen and over 18, you get to vote. And I truly hope everyone here will take the opportunity to do so. Thanks to the initiative of a series of Washington State Secretary of States, beginning with our own Ralph Monroe, it has become easier and easier for us to vote here. This has not always been the case in our nation's history. Going back, beginning at the first forming of our country, states and territories regulated voting, and only white males over 21. Hypothetically, New Jersey was an early exception, allowing some white women who had certain levels of wealth to vote as well. However, New Jersey repealed that right in 1807, so there was just a small window there. The first big change happened in 1870 with the enactment of the 15th Amendment, which extended voting rights to men of color who were U.S. citizens and over the age of 21. However, many states would gradually restrict this right through laws and intimidation for nearly the next 100 years. In 1920, the 19th Amendment was passed, giving women over 21 the right to vote across the country. 17 states had previously granted this right to vote prior to that, with Washington State being the 5th state to do so in 1910. The Voting Rights Act of 1865 outlawed discriminatory voting practices throughout the U.S., correcting the voter limitations that had begun after the approval of the 15th Amendment in 1870. The 21st Amendment, approved in 1971, lowered the voting age to 18 for all eligible U.S. citizens. This was in response to sending many 18-year-old draftees to fight in Vietnam, yet they did not have the right to vote. Another current trend to expand voting is in the many states that have passed laws allowing felons to vote who have completed their sentences and paid their debt to society. Yet we still see in the news many steps to limit voting and many acts to intimidate voters as they drop off their ballots at drop boxes. So here is my challenge to you today. Be sure to vote on November 8th. Encourage others to vote as well. Be grateful to Ralph Monroe, Sam Reed, Kim Wyman, and Steve Hobbs for their stewardship and expansion of our voting rights. And never, never take your right to vote or your fellow citizens' right to vote for granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Jimmy and Freeman, for setting the stage for today's meeting. Our greeters today were Catherine Darley and Matt Albertson. Thank you also to Marcia Matusi for serving as our Zoom meeting host, and to our meeting reporter for the day, Dan Meade-Smith. Now, we have several guests who have joined us today, and if when I call your name, if you would please stand to be recognized. We have Justin Arnold with us. We have 3 guests of Jen Gladish: Sarah Pattison, John Gelzer, Josh Gelzer, and Jason Barrett. Welcome. Our guest of Mark Wright, club member Mark Wright, is Elaine Sweet. And a guest of Doug Seto is Bill Hogan. Got Bill here. And we have Adriana Lanting, the Long Beach chair of the Malaria Partners. Adriana, we're so glad you're here. Hey. Welcome. And last, we also have Erwin Vidalin. Erwin is here, I think. Yes, welcome. If there's any other guests I did not recognize, will you please stand? All right, welcome. So I'm so pleased to bring you a new member introduction today, and here to tell you more about Ryan Pong is Seattle 4 Rotarian Joe Phillips.
Thank you, President Beth. It's my honor today to introduce our newest member, Ryan Pong. Ryan currently serves as Vice President and Chief Academic Officer at Virginia Mason Franciscan Health. His classification is healthcare, and his membership has been sponsored by Lisa Mayfield. Ryan was born in Winnipeg and after 5th grade grew up in Vancouver, BC. He attended the University of British Columbia, where he studied neuroscience, and after graduation entered medical school at Loma Linda University in California, specializing in anesthesiology. In 2003, he started a 4-year residency at Virginia Mason, and after a 1-year fellowship in neuroanesthesiology at UW, returned to Virginia Mason to join their physician group. While the original plan was to return to Canada, he came to Seattle and, like so many of us, could not leave. As you may or may not know, Virginia Mason has an impressive residency program for hospitals unaffiliated with a medical school, sponsoring many more residents than similar institutions. Gradually, Ryan was asked to do more and more with the residency and education programs of Virginia Mason, until 4 years ago when he was asked to oversee all those programs. And with the merger with CHI Franciscan in 2021, he was asked to do so for the new 11-hospital system. So now he spends about 70% of his time as Chief Academic Officer and 30% practicing anesthesiology. Ryan and his wife, Tarumi, live in Magnolia and have 14-year-old twins, Liam and Caden. Of course, work and family keep him very busy, but Ryan also loves international travel, skiing, and cycling. Luckily, at least 2 of those were COVID-friendly activities during the last two years. So please join me in welcoming our newest member, Ryan Pong.
Thank you, Joe, and congratulations, Ryan. You are joining over 2 million members of the longest-standing service club in the world. Now, Rotarians are asked to step up through acts of service, like volunteering at a food bank or serving as a business mentor. And we're also asked to provide a financial investment at a level comfortable to each of us. And this allows Seattle Rotary to grant funds to local projects and Rotary International to address global issues. Club member John Bridge is chair of the Seattle Rotary Service Foundation campaign, and he's going to tell us more about this program. Now, John is joining us by Zoom while he recovers from COVID, so we wish you well, John.
Well, thank you much. I am trying to recover from COVID. I had planned on being there in person, but I'm representing our Seattle Rotary Foundation. Remember that our whole idea—
We'll get him up in just a moment here.
Am I on?
Should we have John?
Am I on? Can you hear me? I'm glad that people online can hear me, but can everyone in the audience hear me? All right. Well, I am hearing those people. I'll continue talking for a couple of minutes here with talking about the Seattle Rotary Foundation and how terribly important it is for us to, as service above self, to contribute each year. And so what I wanted to do is just go through a quick update of our Rotary Foundation annual program, which tells us all of the things that we spend lots of money on in making our community better. Our arts community, we spent $20,000 on. Our business mentors, over $9,000. Our community service, $16,500. Our education committee, where we support the United Negro College Fund, of over $40,000. Environmental sustainability, almost $9,000. $78,000 for our international service. Peace builders, we have over $21,000 there. Our Boys and Girls Club, which is ours, for over $63,000. Our Harvest Against Hunger for $15,000, and over $60,000 for Malaria Partners. We can support this only with the dollars that all of you give to our foundation. And it's a very simple thing to do. We can just go online, and I've put this, hopefully you can see this in front of you. There are gifts that can be made on a monthly basis or a personal basis once a year, and we hope that you'll all be able to do that. The suggested amount is $400 per person per year, a little bit less for those of our younger members. But we also have various levels where you can give $1,000 or $2,500 and get additional recognition. At the same time you go online to do this, make sure that you also give an annual gift to our Rotary International, which is also a basic requirement of our being able to work with the international organization. And that's the only way we get funding also that is matched by our international organization. So hopefully everyone, before the end of the year, or even right now before you forget, go online, make a donation. It's very simple. Just go to seattlerotary.org and hit that donate button, and then you can donate both to the Seattle Rotary Service Foundation as well as setting up a monthly donation if you don't want to give it all at once, and it's done by credit card. So thank you very much for the time, and I hope that we will have an extremely positive response by all of our membership in providing for Seattle Rotary.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your leadership in this campaign. I will say that I have already made my contribution to both campaigns, and the online process was so fast and easy. I do have one recommendation, though. If your computer uses Safari as its browser, I suggest switching to Chrome, because that works much better for the Rotary donation platforms. And you know, it is such a help when you make that commitment to do this, your contribution before the end of the year. It just saves so much time for people reaching out to you and asking you to make that happen. And it allows us to trigger that matching program that is so critical to our contributions. All right, so next we're going to move to our main program, after which we will have time for Q&A. So here at the Western, we have roving microphone handler Kathy Gibson to spot questions, while Jen Gladish will monitor the Zoom chat for questions. Today's main speaker has been a repeat guest because of his perspective on the economy and housing market. And also because his presentation is so relatable for all of us. Matthew Gardner is Chief Economist for Windermere Real Estate and responsible for analyzing and interpreting economic data and its impact on the real estate market on both the local and national level. He has over 28 years of experience both in the U.S. and the UK. He also sits on the Washington State Governor's Council of Economic Advisors. And at the University of Washington, he chairs the Board of Trustees at the Washington Center for Real Estate Research and is an advisory board member at the Runstad Center for Real Estate Studies. Matthew is one of a select number of economists who provides housing market forecasts to Reuters for their home price forecast survey and also participates in Zillow's home price expectation survey. Please join me in welcoming Matthew Gardner.
What a delightful introduction. Good afternoon to you all. Before I start, I know I've got a very short time to let you know. I've got a particular fondness for Rotary. My grandfather, late grandfather, was actually president of Rotary in Great Britain. Those back in the days when it was an all-boys club. Things have certainly evolved from that point to now. I'm going to take about 20 minutes of your time to run through what I'm seeing, both locally as well as nationally, and then open up for questions. So since I've been here, I've already met 2 economists, which means I've already heard 4 different versions of what's going on. Oh, brilliant, thank you. I already heard 4 different versions of what's going on. Is this on? Great. I'm a bit of a wanderer, as you probably gather, so I can't stand behind podiums. They're terrible things. So first on the bat, very quickly, he says, I need to turn this on, or is it not on? How do I now? Maybe? No, not yet. I've got another slide, I promise you. Yes? Ah, there you go. Is that me or you? That was me? That was you. Okay, great. All right. So, labour market. Now, what does this number show you? If you divide the number of unemployed people by the number of job openings in the country, you get a number. Right now, 4 million, wrong, yes, 4 million more job openings in the US than there are unemployed people. That's based upon a U3 number. So in reality, if people aren't looking for jobs, that's a higher number. It wouldn't look so bad. But it is a remarkably, remarkably tight labour market. What was going on? COVID. And COVID kicked in, 2 things happened. A lot of our more seasoned workers, they looked around and said, to heck with this, I'm taking retirement. They disappeared. And a lot of our younger workers, well, they had an early midlife crisis. They're like, I'm going to become an author. And they literally left the labour force. So what happens when the labour market is remarkably tight? Wages. Now this, here we've actually broke it down into high-skilled, mid-skilled and low-skilled jobs. And you see here the low-skilled jobs, annualized 6.3% wage growth. Now, is that inflationary? Absolutely it is. And it's particularly impact on more of those face-to-face industries, like leisure and hospitality, hotels, bars, these kinds of things. For one simple reason, they were the first laid off during COVID. And now all the hotels want people to come back. They just don't want to pay them anymore. And so we've seen significant increase in wages. And that unto itself is inflationary because those companies are not going to absorb that out of the goodness of their hearts. They're going to pass it through to you and I. So your hotel night will cost you more, your old-fashioned will cost you more, your steak will cost you more money. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing inflation the way we are right now. Now, inflation. The Federal Reserve has a dual mandate, full employment, stable inflation. That's the only job they're there to do. And as we know, they've been raising rates significantly. Today, another 75 basis point increase in the Fed funds rate. My opinion, that was certainly expected. I think they'll do a 50% or 50 bip, half a point raise in December. They won't in January, and they'll raise twice again in February and March, but by about a quarter point each. Now, why is that important? Well, the Fed has a notorious for their inability for a soft landing. They've been lousy at it for decades. And so because what they end up doing is they start raising interest rates too late. They should have been raising them a year ago, in my opinion. And they continue raising them for too long. And because of that, we are going to have a mild recession next year. And it will be mild in the second quarter. Not too bad peak to trough. I mean, recessions happened. America's had 19 significant recessions in its history. You're going to have 19 more. It's going to be okay. But eventually, by the time they stop raising rates and start pulling them back, it will be too late. You see, quite frankly, we've been printing money since 2008. And we've actually in a situation right now where they're now saying, oh, yeah, we probably should try and fix this. And they're doing too much to do it. The recession we're going to have, it will look nothing like 2007. It'll look nothing like 2000, the dot-com recession we had here. It'll look a lot more like 1991, very mild. And quite frankly, it's going to have fairly limited impacts on our market, but I'll get to that shortly. So very quickly on the local situation, here I looked at the makeup of jobs and those jobs that were lost to COVID and those jobs recovered. And several sectors have seen a full recovery. I always find it fascinating if you look at the very bottom, the information sector. Thank you, Amazon.com. Shed a whopping 800 jobs, and they were mainly front of house staff, increased employment by almost 28,000. Why? Well, not sure about you guys. I was buying toilet paper on Amazon through the pandemic. So done very well. But it's good to see construction starting to pick up, business services. But in general, if you look down that list, other than aerospace, it tend to be far more face-to-face industries that are still lagging. And for most of them, that tends to be lower paid industries as well. Worst hit, naturally, leisure and hospitality, hotels, bars, restaurants, I mentioned. But most are coming back and coming back well. Now, you look at what's going on with aerospace, Boeing. However, the President Boeing came out with an interesting statement this morning, basically saying they could actually be cash flow positive within the next year. Aerospace is remarkably important to our state. It is, on a dollar basis, by far our largest export. Big question is going to be, we know we need to replace the global fleet of aircraft in the next 25 years. Will it be Airbus? Unlikely. European Central Bank is not so much a bank anymore. So there are some issues going on in Europe that will certainly hurt them. Now, the question here for us is, Boeing, is it going to be here or is it going to be in South Carolina? And ultimately, aerospace is very important for our region, particularly, less so in King County, very much so to our friends in the north up in Snohomish County. So we will, I believe, lose a modest amount of jobs next year in the metro area, probably somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000, really not that bad at all compared to other markets across the country. But I know you're all here to hear me talk about housing. So that's the quick thing about what's going on the economic side. But mortgage rates. Can you tell when Jed Powell turned around and said we were going to move from quantitative easing to quantitative tightening? I bet you can. First week of this year. Why? Well, through the course of COVID and the pandemic, they were buying 10-year treasuries, they were buying mortgage-backed securities to the tune of about $2.7 trillion worth. And now they're not going to be buying those anymore. And if you understand how mortgage rates are created, they're based upon the yield or the interest rate on 10-year treasuries. Fewer buyers out there, the interest rate, price goes down, the yield goes up. And as such, mortgage rates have gone parabolic. But through COVID, I'm not sure about you guys, I refinanced my home twice. Literally. Signed both things in my garage. It's kind of unique. But we were at rates which were not just historically low, artificially low. And there's going to be problems because of that going forward. We've seen rates more than double. A remarkable situation, never seen before, fastest increase since the early 90s. But here's my forecast, though. They're not going to keep on going up because we are going to have a recession, because I believe that we are getting a handle to a degree on inflation. I think we'll start seeing it very slowly taper down, but it's certainly not going to be sub 3% 30-year mortgages again at all. But I do think we reached a peak. Now, some people are trying to conflate what's going on in our housing market nationally and locally today with what happened in 2005, started in 2005 with the bursting of the housing bubble. You can't do it. I know why you can't do it. In 2005, my dog qualified for a mortgage. A zero down option arm with cash back at closing. What could possibly go wrong? It is a very different situation we find us in today, though. But financing costs are significantly higher, and that is going to have an impact on home prices. So let's look at our market here. I'm just going to concentrate on existing single-family homes. Everyone's saying, oh, there's going to be a flood of supply. Is that really a flood of supply? No, it's not. And we're not going to see that. And here's why we are not going to see it. We know that people will move. 3 reasons: job change, death, divorce. But those that choose to move, how many of us, I'll be honest with you, I have a 2% 20-year fixed mortgage. Why the heck would I ever move? So we're not going to see that churn, that supply that you'd expect to see. And if you're not seeing an oversupply, as the economists in the room know, everything's based upon supply and demand. You limit supply, you still have net new demand. That allows prices to continue to appreciate. Sales, massive year. All our brokers across my company had an extraordinary year last year. We're down, a bit more than 20% right now. Only 2.5% down from where we were in 2019. You see, I'm actually trying to ignore 2020 and 2021. They were artificial. They weren't real. We saw people moving because of the pandemic, the work from home paradigm, which people still haven't figured out. A lot of companies, they still can't get a grasp of what's going on. Now, when it first happened, the work from home situation came up, everyone thought we were going to leave. We're all going to move to Yakima. No, we're not. Nor did we. But I think for a majority of workers, it's going to be a hybrid model. A couple of days a week in the office, the balance at home. I don't think we're ever going to go back to 2019. However, we did see a resurgence in the suburbs and in ex-urban markets because there's a value to our time. We'll pay more to live closer to where we need to be. And that's why home prices, in essence, look like a wedding cake. Closer to the job centers you get, the more expensive it becomes. That's changing. Markets or neighborhoods like Mountain Lake Terrace, great example, undergoing massive gentrification right now. People moving out of Seattle, out of Capitol Hill, going up there, paying all cash for a house, renovating it, restoring it. It's really interesting to see. So I think we are going to see a lot more of that going forward. But we're not going to get back to the traditional 300,000 people working in downtown Seattle every day. And that has a lot of impacts to the economy, which I don't have time to talk about, but maybe you'll invite me back again. But sales haven't disappeared completely. Prices, however, have. Some average and median prices of homes in the county. Median, obviously, is a better way of looking at it. Now, we're down significantly from our peaks. But I think some people, there was an analyst, a real estate analyst, a friend of mine, Ali Wolf, and Ali went on CNBC and said, we are in a housing recession. Now, if you actually look at that interview online, you'll see a phone by her. It starts shaking, and that's me phoning her saying, what the hell are you saying? It's not a housing recession, it's a housing reversion. We're getting back to normality. That massive peak you see in transactional prices through COVID was because mortgage rates dropped below 3%, literally. Now, I say we're not going to get rid of we're not going to move because of our mortgage rate. By my calculations, there's roughly 25 to 30 million homeowner households in America that have a mortgage rate of 3 or below. That is a massive, massive number. So we're not going to see a flood of supply. It's going to be constrained. That can allow prices to continue to rise. So if one was to take a trend line going back in time and stopping at 2019 and forecast it forward, it will come out that line would be below those numbers you see here, but not by that far. We will see a contraction in pricing, without a doubt, next year, but we are reverting to the long-term trend, which here, by the way, on average is 5 to 5.5% home price growth every year. Because we've done so well, this is remarkable, 2 in 3 households with a mortgage have more than 50% equity in their homes. That's an extraordinary number. And again, you can clearly see what happened through the pandemic. We were around 45, 48. Went, again, parabolic after that. So we are sat on a lot of cash in our homes today. But my forecast is we cannot carry on. 22% price growth last year makes no sense. So we will be positive, just shy of 10% this year. We are going to see an annualized contraction of around 4% next year. Really not that bad at all, given the fact that 2 in 3 households have 50% equity. We've all done remarkably well on our homes, without a doubt. But we have to pay the piper at some point, and next year will be it. But it will not be the systemic drop in prices we saw in 2007 through 2011. On the new housing side, we're not building enough, or even close to it. People want to be here. Where are they coming from? California. Northern California, actually. They're jumping on I-5, or the 5 as they call it, and up they go. A few of the silly ones stop in Oregon, the rest come to Seattle. It's not just here. They're actually going to Salt Lake City, Utah, Austin, Texas, Boise, Idaho. Boise, Idaho, prices have tripled in the last 3 years. Tripled. Big problem there as well. But anyway, we haven't been pulling enough permits. Why? We have run out of land. There is no political will to expand our urban growth boundaries. Basically, you can build inside these areas. And given that, it is remarkably expensive. We have 2 large tracts, one down by Federal Way, one down Black Diamond, and the other one out by Tacoma. That's it. So it's all now, in essence, urban infill. And again, if you're not building more, and we've still got people moving here, King County, certainly most populous county in the state, fastest growing last year over year. But where was that followed by? A lot of people would think it would be Pierce County or Snohomish. No, Spokane County was number 2, and Clark County was number 3. People are moving out of Portland. They're living in Clark County and commuting to Portland every day, across a bridge which I swear is going to fall down one of these days. It really will. We've got about 540,000 owner-occupied housing units in the county. My forecast for 5 years, that'll grow by about 7.5%. What does that mean? We've got demand for over 41,000 new owner, not renter, owner-occupied housing units in the county. Now, given the permit activity, not even close at all. And you say, well, hang on, you can build high rises downtown. Yes, you could. It will cost the builder roughly $1,000 a square foot to build it. So you've got to sell those units for $1,400 a foot to make a margin. How deep is the world for 1,000 square feet for $1.4 million? Plus the fact, the issues which we all know are going on in downtown Seattle today as well. So we have a massive housing shortage. And because we have a housing shortage, housing affordability has plummeted. This is analysis we've done at UW since 1994, which looks at the ability of a household making median income to afford a medium priced house. Plummeted as interest rates skyrocketed. It was affordable here for households back in 2012. But what about first-time buyer households, our youngsters? It has never been affordable for them to buy a home here. I sent my youngest son, William, off to Gonzaga for undergrad. By the time he gets done with that and he gets his master's, where is he going to be able to afford to live in 8 years' time? It will not be back with me. I changed the locks. We should be worried about this. Affordability is a big, big concern. And here's what can be done. To give you an idea how bad it is, City of Seattle, zoning in Washington State was created back in the late 20s, early 1930s. It made sense, I would argue, till the 70s. Does it make sense now? No. So if you look at that light kind of mustard-looking color, single family, zoned areas. The dark blue, multifamily. So that lighter one, single family, 30 square miles. Home to date about 165,000 homes. The small, tiny area is 10 square miles and 200,000 homes. Do we need to look at zoning today? Yes, we do. And there is a way we can do this. It's called the missing middle housing. What it does, you look at the urban environment, and you look at suburbia, and there's that area in the middle where it is ripe for the development of duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, courtyard cottages, these kinds of buildings. But the trouble is here, in essence, we are already built out. They are the domain of single-family housing. And so it'd have to be a replacement, and that's going to get very, very expensive. But if I mention zoning changes in the media, I do a radio thing every month on Cairo, and another interviewer afterwards said, a guy called Dory Monson wanted to talk to me. We had a half-hour screaming match. He's like, you want to build all this stuff at my neighborhood, it's going to ruin it, my home value is going to go down. I said, Dory, no, it won't. There's been academic papers written for 50 years to demonstrate that actually home prices go up at a faster rate if you allow that to occur. You start seeing not high-rise development, duplexes, let's say townhomes inside single-family zoned areas. But there's a lot of people that say, no, this is just not the way we want to do it. And because we are already built out, it makes it remarkably difficult. You have to raise what's there, rebuild, and that in turn becomes remarkably expensive. But we have a lot of people push back. How do I know this? I was in Idaho giving a speech a while ago. Welcome to Idaho. Idaho's full. You could have bought a home in Boise in 2019 for $250,000. That same home today is $650,000. I like Boise. I'm not sure I like $650,000 Boise. Or there's this. Go away. We miss cows. In essence, what do I see? I see a housing market which got ahead of itself because financing costs were, in essence, zero. I see an economy here which is diversified, which is good, without a doubt. Certainly well paid here. People moving here from California. So they're mainly north, they're coming in from San Francisco. The ones in the south in the LA basin, they're going east to Riverside or south to San Diego. But the north, they're coming up here. And they're saying, wow, I can sell my one-bedroom townhome in San Francisco and buy 3 of these. Literally. So we're benefiting from that, but is that really a benefit? Housing, shelter, it's an organic good. We've always needed it. We will always need it. But what is it going to look like and where is it going to be? Are we becoming increasingly exclusionary? Historically, that's what we've done. If you had a job in King County, if you couldn't afford to live here, I-5 North Snohomish County. Then in 2018, that changed. And it was I-5 South Pierce County, because there's a $100,000 delta between median prices in Snohomish and Pierce. We're pushing people further and further out. Yet the main job centers are still here. And how can we change that? I really think we need to look at our zoning policies, at our land use policies in general, to make that definition. There's no political will to expand the growth boundaries. I know that, being down with the governor as often as I am. So that's not going to change. We're not going to add land. We're not going to fill in Elliott Bay. Not going to happen. But I will caution everyone in this room with this one last thought. Companies, when they're looking to expand into any market, look at 2 things. One, is there a talented workforce to hire? Well, we are, believe it or not, the most intellectual large city in America in terms of the population with a bachelor's degree or higher of any large city in the country. We are wicked smart, my friends at Harvard would say. 2, and this comes from the CFO, how much do you have to pay people? And the biggest component of salaries is cost of living. At what point they say I've got to pay people how much? Not to live in a shoebox? Well, then markets like Boise, like Spokane, like Las Vegas can become increasingly attractive. We've lived on the backs of giants since Bill Boeing founded the Boeing Company, South Lake Union in 1917. We went where they went, sometimes good, sometimes bad. And in the 1980s, there are a couple of guys playing around in a kind of podunk office in Albuquerque, New Mexico, with computers. Well, they came back here. They became Microsoft. So I think we have lived on the backs of giants for a long time, but at what point do we can't just assume that the next big company is they all have gone to the same school together here. It won't happen. And so unless we address the housing needs of people here, that's the only way we can keep our economy flourishing, which it has the potential to do. But there's a lot of obstacles, and pricing is certainly one of them. And don't forget the fact that in the county, King County, we have 650,000 millennials. They're getting older. Literally. 1 million millennial women in America is having a baby every year. They're moving away from the casual hookups into real relationships, and buying a home is absolutely what they want. Why do they want to buy a home? Well, the median household wealth of an owner household in America is about $310,000. The median household wealth of a rental household in America is about $8,000. It's where the majority of the country create their wealth and build their wealth. So is it important? I don't want to be not dismissive, but depressing about it. No housing bubble. We're reverting. We'll see prices start picking up again in 2024. That's fine. We're sat on a ton of equity. People want to be here. But where are they going to live? And that, I think, is something which we all need to be very cognizant and very thoughtful of. This is not 2007. We're overqualified. I said I refinanced twice. It was like giving blood, literally. I mean, all of a sudden, my mortgage broker said, oh, why did this bank account go down in value? I went grocery shopping. Whole Foods, I know, but it was grocery shopping. So it's a very different scenario today than we saw back then. So we're reverting, but beyond that, housing market, I think, we are all doing well as homeowners, as most of us are. But we need to be a little bit thoughtful about the world going forward. Hopefully, in my very short time, you found my brief thoughts of interest. If you have got any questions for me, I would be delighted to answer them. And again, thank you for the invitation to come here and address you guys today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Matthew. Questions? Faith?
Oh, wow. Lots of them. Great.
Hello.
Hello.
I'd like to ask you your opinion of the governor's proposed bill, I think that is talking about keeping institutional and equity funds from buying residential real estate.
Right. It's a very valid thing. However, if you think about King County in the last quarter, 2% of transactions were to institutional investors. Institutional investors, they are not that prevalent in our market today for one simple reason. We are too expensive. They are now far more active in markets in Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama. Because think about it this way, if you're buying a house here and you're paying $900,000 for it, they want to achieve a yield, a return on that investment. However, the rental price they can get doesn't make sense for them to do it. And in fact, I will add one more thing, and that is a lot of our single-family you're a lot of people think when you're a renter, you rent an apartment. No, a lot of people do rent single-family homes. But through the moratoria on evictions, tenants were not paying their rent, which, okay, but they were also not paying the utilities either. Those homes were having liens put on them. And certainly in 2021, a lot of these small investors said, heck with this, the market's great, I'm going to sell, do something else. So we've seen a diminishment of the stock of single-family rentals, and that's pushed rental rates up significantly, but still not to a point that I think institutions like Blackstone, these kind of guys, it's not of interest to them because we are just too expensive. You're welcome.
Thank you. I have a question from Zoom. It's me down here, Jen.
Hello. Oh, hello.
To start with, I think that I am the young person who is a transplant from California who would love to buy a home one day that you're talking about, yep. Which also leads me to a plug that I think Jim Moore was trying to give me. What investment instruments would you recommend for cash reserves of nonprofits and CD rates?
Oh, speak to my broker. It's not a world in which I live. it's very hard right now, as we all know, because cash that we have, we're losing money on it, given the existing rate of inflation. I am certainly not a fan of cryptocurrencies. I think it's a Ponzi scheme. Have always thought. I was actually giving a speech actually for Berkshire Hathaway and talking to a guy called Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and Charlie said, "I'm not going to support anything that's to the benefit of extortionists and kidnappers." That's how he calls crypto. I think real estate is possibly commercial real estate. There are some ways you can do that, but then it all depends on how long you're happy to tie your money up for. Short term, well, yields on 2-year paper are 4.5%. I'm afraid it's not a world in which I live from an investment standpoint. So I apologize. I try and stick in my own lane of housing as opposed to financial stuff. I leave my guys to do that. They've been doing a lousy job for me over the last year, as most have seen.
Okay.
Me.
Another question here in the ballroom from Catherine.
Hi, thank you.
Hello.
So what with gas companies making historic profits, one discussion I've heard is that we're actually seeing price gouging from major corporations and not really inflation, and that we need to discuss it as price gouging and not go along with the storyline.
Right. And that is fascinating. Actually, the Economic Policy Institute released a paper last week which looked at corporate profits now through the pandemic and how much they account for total inflation. They're saying it's around 50%. So inflation would be 50% lower had that not been the case. Now, in the 80s and late 70s, when we had that massive long-term spike in inflation, corporate profits increased, but only by 11%. So is that happening? Absolutely it is. And is that something which needs to be addressed at the federal level? Yeah. And I believe the discussions around windfall taxes are happening right now. But you cannot have these massive, they can talk all day long about supply chain interruptions and all this kind of stuff. No. If that was the case, they should not be making money hand over fist, and they are. But when you can take half, in essence, of inflation, I'm going to be careful, though, about that, because if you look at the core rate of inflation, which I like to do because it excludes food and energy, which are the most volatile sectors, it's not as bad, but it is certainly a number which should be of concern to our elected officials. And I think these windfall taxes are absolutely appropriate. But, I mean, if you really say that it's on the backs of us, and yet they're doing remarkably well, there's something wrong with that. And so I know that people are talking about that, but you are quite correct. However, even if you were to take that back to the 11% we saw in the early 80s, that still puts the core rate of inflation at around 4%. So a bit less than that, still above the 2% long-term mandate that the Fed has for core inflation. But yeah, it's happening. You're absolutely right, especially here. I was even in Eastern Washington. Gas was below $4 a gallon. I live on Queen Anne, still $5.65. But California is still north of $8. Another good reason to move here.
We've got another question from Zoom. What do you think needs to happen to wages in the Seattle area to keep the housing market going?
Well, we increased our local minimum wage. That's gone up again. I find it's quite extraordinary where we are right now. So I live on Queen Anne. Down the bottom of the hill is a restaurant, McMinimans. They had an advert outside for a line cook, $25 an hour. That's scary. It gets scary. So, and the problem with that, as I said earlier, that is inherently inflationary, because it's going to be a direct pass-through from the business to the consumer. And at some point, we're going to back off spending money, and we will. We have to. And what we've been doing now, we've been digging into our savings a lot. In fact, at the peak of the pandemic, we had savings in our checking accounts at levels which this country has never, ever seen before. But they have been dropping just because we have to go shopping. But it is a big problem. And the trouble is, when you think about the makeup of wages, it goes back to what I said earlier, shelter is the biggest component. And if you're renting downtown today, and you're paying anywhere on a new building, $5, $6 per square foot, what does that mean? 1,000 square foot unit at $6 is $6,000 a month rent. That doesn't work. And that's why I think we need to start looking at, not so much low-income housing. Bellwether, Lehigh, Plymouth, Sharon, those guys are great. But we have to look at people making 80 to 120% of median income. Firefighters, nurses, teachers. They're the ones that really haven't seen the benefits. That's pushing them further and further out in terms of where they can afford to live. So it is that missing middle, which is what the slide I showed you, is applicable to those people. Now, on the low-income side, the problem they have, they're fighting over the same land as market rate developers. And Sharon Lee runs Lehigh, Low Income Housing Institute. And she told me a while ago, found a site she wanted to buy, and a certain developer came in and literally said, I'll pay you X much in 10 days, all cash, no contingencies. Sharon can't play that game. So it is a cross spectrum, but I do particularly worry about that middle income housing, because that's so much of what's driving up, not just getting people to come back to work, but what they need to be paid just so they can afford to live somewhere that's not way out in the middle of nowhere and have that wonderful commute. So that is a big, big concern. So I don't see it. We certainly have seen it increase. It's a pass-through. That is inflationary. However, there's ways around it. I think we have to build our way out of this, and that doesn't happen quickly.
Time for one more question in the
All
audience.
right.
Last question. Wow.
Last
but
question for
quickly.
Jevin.
From either of the economists either.
Thank
No.
you so much for being here.
You're
You
welcome,
painted
sir.
an interesting picture for us. What happens when we add some color to that picture? In other words, what are the possible racial or racial impacts of what you've shared with us today?
Yeah. And that is something else, which again is beyond housing affordability, very near and dear to my heart. And I'll just mention this one number nationally. White households in America, 72% of all white households in America own their homes. Black households, 44%. Hispanic households, 56%. And that's going to be a big increase, I think, in the next 20 years in Hispanic households. But that is the problem. And it's a massive one. Because what we're seeing is we're pricing people out of home ownership. We know that home ownership, not just it's a way to generate money. Children of homeowners do significantly better at school than children of renters. Homeowners have a greater sense of civic desire to be part of their community far more than renters. You tend to be more into your neighborhoods. So there are so many positive things around owners rather than renting, beyond the tax implications, which obviously are positive. But it still comes back to the point, I would argue, of affordability. If we can start to address that, then I think that is a way we can start reducing the absolute price, creating middle-income housing, and that racial disparity will start to diminish, but it's not going to go away soon. Now, we know we've moved away from the heinous days of Laurelhurst back in the 60s. That was completely exclusionary. Hopefully, we'll start moving away from certain mortgage companies now adjusting their mortgage rate they charge somebody based upon their last name. That happens, which is terrible. So the only way you can do this, in my opinion, would be to build your way out of it. Because, again, supply and demand. Yes, land is expensive here, but we've only got so much of it. If we can start building denser, then I think that's a way to do it. But we do have the biggest issue is that fact we are keeping the goal of home ownership, which is still the American dream, away from a significant share of our population, both on an age basis, but also on an ethnicity basis. And that is wrong on every level. But it can be addressed, but you can't just subsidize it. I think what you need to do is build more that can create housing at an absolutely lower price point and start to create that wealth for households that they have missed it out on it completely. So I've got on my soapbox a little bit on that one. Again, you've been remarkably patient with me. Thank you for your time.
Matthew, thank you. We appreciate your insights and perspectives on a topic that is so impactful to all of us. And in recognition of the generosity of your time, we will be donating in your name to the Harvest Against Hunger, which is a nonprofit agency that provides healthy meal components to food banks. And we've given 600 servings of healthy produce in your name. So thank you. Kathy and Jen, thank you for fielding questions from our members. And as you all know, our club benefits greatly from the sponsorship of several members, and I'd like to express my gratitude to our gold sponsors, Liz Powell with Remax on Market, and longtime Rotary supporter Bob Alexander. Our other sponsors include Joel Farrell with Morgan Stanley, Dominic Musafia, Seattle Divorce Options, Jacobson Jarvis, Certified Public Accountants, Matt Bretlin, Net Tech Pro Bono IT Services, and for our tech support, Live Oak AV. We have a round of applause for our sponsors, please. All right, to close out our program, we have a few announcements from our co-VP of membership, Nicole Klein, after which Jen Gladish, who is standing in for our Prince of Programs, Ken Grant, today, will share what speakers are scheduled for in the coming weeks. Nicole.
Okay, so we have something tomorrow. So Jeff Parker, where was he sitting? If you want to attend a Seattle Art Museum tour with him, leading the permanent exhibits and the special ones, you meet tomorrow at 5 p.m. and then afterwards you can walk over to the Goldfinch. So if you let him know you're coming, we can reserve the right size of table. And then we have a couple more events coming up involving art also. So the next slide, if you're ready. Yes, so Urban Artworks. This group has 2 events. So next weekend on Friday in Ballard, you can help paint a mural and support BIPOC artists. Or that next Saturday, you can be in Linwood. So that's something you can, all ages, and something fun to do. Hopefully weather cooperates. I don't know how that works. And then the last one, do we have one more? Yes, our holiday party. So I had it on my calendar, but now you can actually register, and I think I was the first one to buy tickets. So it's at Queen City Yacht Club this year from 6 to 8 p.m. So thanks, guys.
Wow, I've never actually been up here, and you all are just gorgeous people. I'd be much nicer than Ken. We have a couple of things that are coming up. So next week, we will have Bob Donegan that will share the state of the waterfront, tell us about the construction of the park, hopefully all of the wonderful things that are coming to make Seattle beautiful again. And then that's at the West End. The following week, on November 16th, we'll have Michael Greer at the Arts Fund, also at the West End. And then the following meeting is Thanksgiving week, so we will not have a new meeting. And happy Thanksgiving then. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Nicole and Jen. I wanted to remind everyone that we are assembling a list of candidates for positions on the club board and the foundation board. So if you are ready to step up, because you know I'm looking at all of you, in the coming year, these roles are a fantastic opportunity to engage with other Rotarians and give back to our club. You can express your interest, or if you have a recommendation, you've talked to someone else and believe that they would be a good leader or a candidate, please contact the Nominations Committee Chair, Jan Levy. And Jan is not here today, she's online, but you can also get her email from Mary as you leave, or you can also reach out to any one of the current board members, myself included, Mary and Karma, and express your interest, and we'll get it to Jan. Now, if anyone is interested in a webinar that is sharing Rotary's work in the Ukraine, it will occur this Saturday, and you can find details and the link on seattlerotary.org or in Friday's newsletter. Now, we'll wrap up here. You know, given my role in the Seattle sports community, I'd like to leave you all with highlights from our sports teams. Sports serves as a great conversation topic as you're networking or socializing, so hopefully I'll leave you with a few key updates to make you sound really smart. All right, it'll be Friday Night Lights at Husky Stadium this week when they play Oregon State on Friday at 7:30. And after a close loss to a strong Utah last week, the Washington State Cougs try to get back on track against Stanford, playing on the road this Saturday. Now, last night, the Kraken struggled against Calgary, but they surged back for a victory, putting them in 3rd place in the Pacific Division. Yes. Now, meanwhile, the Hawks lead the NFC West after a big win against the New York Giants last week. Yeah, that was such a great game. And Russell, who indeed. And they play their division rival, Arizona, this Sunday. Now, who remembers from 2019 the XFL team Seattle Dragons? Anyone? Yeah, there's a few of you out there. So they're back. And I don't know if you know that the Seattle Dragons, the XFL League, when the pandemic hit, they were not able to survive, and they did file bankruptcy. But it was repurchased by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson as well as a couple other investors. And they just announced this week that Seattle's team has been rebranded the Seattle Sea Dragons. So similar and same great graphics if you remember them from before. Now, the team is not located here. None of the teams are in their home city. They are all located in Texas, near Houston, and they all share a training facility and resources, and then they will come to their home city to play. And so the Sea Dragons will come play 8 games at Lumen Field, and their season starts in February. Now, I'll leave you with a quote from the XFL Dragon owner, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, as he says, "Be real, be kind, and be yourself. Set your bar extremely high. Surround yourself with quality. Outwork your competition and go move the world." Meeting adjourned.